Trying to pretend that Fast and Furious is not a scandal. But let me remind you, Watergate didn't have body bags.
It's rare where you have a political scandal where you can tie murders to the actions, specific actions of an administration.
Operation Fast and Furious was the most ill-conceived law enforcement operation I've heard of in my lifetime.
When you think about an administration, a Justice Department actually creates a program that will sell guns to criminals, to set up that program, and to talk gun dealers into selling guns to people they don't want to sell guns to.
Fast and Furious, really, it's just yet another example of contempt for the rule of law. We're not enforcing the rules. We weren't enforcing our gun laws.
Can you imagine if Mexico had a program or Canada had a program where they let guns walk into America, what our State Department would have done and had the right to do?
And welcome back to the special edition of Hannity. The botched ATF operation known as Fast and Furious not only let guns from the United States walk into Mexico, it also cost border agent Brian Terry his life. Joining me now with reaction to two people who have been following the story from the very beginning, from the Washington Times, Kerry Picket, and the author of Fast and Furious, Pavlich, is with us. We now know this is deeper than we originally thought. Let's walk through this. So our government literally gave guns to drug dealers, cartels, known criminals, murderers, kidnappers. They gave them the guns, and they didn't track them.
Right. And Sean, they're giving them to people who are willing to go into a teenage birthday party and mow teenagers, including women,
this was in Mexico, where
down in Mexico. I mean, these are the kinds of people they were arming here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're also seeing is our Justice Department, who just simply does not want to take responsibility. They figure that since the IG report came out, and they said, oh, well, gee, you know, Eric Holder, he's not being held responsible. You know, we have one retirement, we also have one resignation, and so therefore, Eric Holder, he's okay. But you know what? In the end, the Inspector General Horowitz said, not exactly, because Eric Holder still has to account for a lot of the people who are under him at this point.
First of all, I mean, Darrell Issa is doing his job, and he's been trying to get to the bottom of this from day one, and all they have done is they have stonewalled and stonewalled and stonewalled, and then we get to the point where there's going to be a contempt charge. Then at the last minute in comes executive privilege so they can stonewall further.
Right.
What are they hiding?
Well, and this is a case where the Justice Department thinks that giving the American people in the Oversight Committee 7,000 pages of blacked out material means transparency and means the truth. And you had President Obama coming in 15 minutes before the first contempt vote took place in the Oversight Committee on Capitol Hill. And you have Eric Holder and President Obama continually saying this is a low-level rogue operation. Well, if that's the case, then why was executive privilege necessary? Exactly.
And they also said they had great skepticism, the IG report, in terms of what Eric Holder knew or didn't know, because in their words, everybody around him knew. They find it a little bit, you know, difficult to believe he had no knowledge of this at all.
Right.
And if you noticed, the IG also mentioned that the Justice Department was not forthcoming in giving out materials that the Congress wanted. Gee, what a shock. But when you have your own Inspector General mentioning that to you, saying, look, the Republicans and some Democrats as well were being very upset about you not giving out materials. They're not imagining this. Then obviously there's something wrong going on in the Justice Department.
Right, and it goes all the way up to the White House. I mean, the IG also said that the White House wasn't cooperating with the Inspector General's investigation at all. Kevin O'Reilly, who was on the National Security Team, was getting emails about Fast and Furious. And when we found that out, guess what happened to him? The Obama administration shipped him off into a State Department position in Iraq, and we can't find him now.
Where is he? He's missing in action.
Not available to answer questions from Congress.
Well, I want to know this, because they always say, well, this was started under President Bush. The president himself has said that. That's a lie. Explain.
Well, let's remember here that when when Operation Wide Receiver, which is what they like to refer to as Bush's gun-running program, they were doing, of course, in cooperation with the Mexican government. Katie actually explains this.
But they also traced the weapons.
Right.
Big difference.
And they're making arrests and indicting straw purchasers rather than just watching them for over a year buy these guns and going into Mexico.
Exactly. And then when they realized as well that some of the Mexican authorities also weren't picking up some of these criminals on the other side of the border, they said, you know what, this isn't working, let's just scrap the whole program. But then, of course, when Obama's administration started it up, they just, of course, weren't tracking them. They figured, gee, these chips aren't going to be working in these guns, or these tracers aren't going to work in these guns, so let's just let them go.
Right, and they didn't attempt, let's break down the numbers here. They weren't even attempting to track these guns. Out of 2,500 weapons, there were
may be more now, right?
There may be more. 2 GPS recording devices out of 2,500 were put into
2 out of the 2,500.
2 out of 2,500.
And they could have put them on all of them.
Right, in Univision's report earlier this week, they came out and said, look, Bill Newell, who is a former ATF special agent in charge of Phoenix, who was in charge of Fast and Furious from the local level, he needed guns to be showing up at crime scenes so he could go find them. That was the only way they were finding weapons and tracing them back to the United States, was finding them at crime scenes.
And now there are a lot of dead people, including a border agent, including these young kids in Mexico, just mowed down, blown away with guns provided by the U.S. government, and we have no answers.
And no accountability.
Absolutely. I mean, now I think Matt Boyle just came out with like a new piece. I think it was showing how a kingpin, or rather drug kingpin Juarez, I think his name was El Diego, he was captured with Fast and Furious guns. I mean, that is absolutely unacceptable.
Right, and let's not forget the brother of the former Chihuahua Attorney General who was kidnapped and tortured.
That's right.
And his captors were using Fast and Furious guns.
All right, guys, good to see you. Great work.
Thank you.
Unbelievable corruption.